you're a fool if you don't have a mentor. If you think you know it, like I feel like we wouldn't have evolved from cavemen to where we are if it wasn't like the caveman that's a season ahead of you in life was like, "Hey, dude, so you don't want to touch the fire. It's bad." Right? Like you need that guy that's just going to give you like a season ahead of you.
Hi, I'm Daniel Bell.
I'm Patrick Brennan, and this is AfterSOF.
Today, our guest was Mikey Beaven, a retired warrant officer, Special Forces warrant officer who had started off as a conventional Army medic and then became a Special Forces medic. He is the CEO of Smoked Bros out of southern Indiana, and they produce rubs for smoking meat and just putting spices and seasoning on your food. He talked to us a little bit about business, and that's really where his passions lie, is in encouraging others to build their business and to grow their influence.
Yeah, and we were fortunate to have a former guest, Matthew Lambden, join us as a co-host, as Mikey and Matt are both friends. And it's a great conversation, a lot of fun, and I
Yeah.
hope you guys enjoy it.
Hey, so
All right,
let's
we're recording.
just get into what brought you into the military. We're not going to focus on that because what we really want is your brain. We want to know a little bit more about what you're doing now that you're retired and how you got there. So, just give us a quick synopsis. If there's some very pivotal points that you want to talk about that. I'll let Matt and Patrick ask you questions during that time.
Perfect.
Hey, so here's the question. Hey, so you were a W3, right? In SF, First Battalion, First Group. What? Then, when did you make the decision to say, "Hey, I'm done," and "Hey, I have this great idea"?
Man, that's a really long answer you're about to get. So,
Yes.
so I'd say 2017, 2018, I kind of knew I was done as I got to that CW3 space, right? Like you're leaving the team, it's becoming just paperwork. You're just becoming part of the admin paperwork machine. I really didn't want that ever. Um, I'd already had some buddies that gotten out and they were kind of coaching me and talking to me, like, you know, Dave Luton and a couple other guys. And so it seemed less scary, right? Because they were already out doing it and they were fine. They didn't die. They're okay. And so
Yeah.
I made that decision. And then as I was transitioning, like I've always wanted to kind of do my own thing. So started started messing around with kind of like shooting targets and things like that, things that were familiar, right? That I knew how to manipulate or at least kind of monetize, I thought. I had a business, failed epically, lost not a lot, just a couple $1,000 because it was like a hobby to kind of figure out what I want to do when I grow up. Learned a lot of lessons from that, from everything from web development to branding to marketing, messaging, different e-commerce platforms, insurance, like what you got to carry. Um, and then I was like, you know what? After that fail at my like last year in the army, like 2017 to 18, I was like, I should probably go play with somebody else's money for a little bit and kind of understand this thing from to be a technician, right? To be an expert of this. Like I should probably go play with somebody else's money, get some experience and get an education. So when I retired out of SOT D West out at Fort Irwin, I went down, got a job offer with a major subsidiary under the LA Dodgers, working in marketing first and then a transition into an operations job. I found that I wasn't polished the way I was, when you have to talk to the HR person to see how you can refer to people, you probably should get polished. You can't say mouth breather. You can't say, knuckleheads off the books because, he might have a lumpy head and you're going to hurt his feelings.
Mikey, I literally walk around like this, just like aiming it at everybody.
Um, And I thought operations at the time was like our operations, planning, forecasting, aligning resources and time so we can accomplish a mission. Right? It's not. Totally what we think operations are in the military. Wrong. That's not what ops are. I love hearing guys that I did this Stanford program, for sergeant majors online, and now I'm an operations expert. And you're like, yeah, but can you manage a P&L and L and a cash flow statement? And do you know how to like increase revenue streams or diversify revenue stream? So you don't know ops, bro. So the learning curve, just talking about that, the learning curve, it was steep. It was a steep climb, and I was like, man, that Pepperdine program that I went to for my MBA, um, it was a reserve parachute because I was like, man, guys were throwing out acronyms. EBITDA, EBIT, ROHAS. Do you know what your ROAS is? ROAS. Do you know what like what? And you're like, Investopedia became my new Bible, right? Being a former 18 Delta, it was like my Merc manual now, working in ops, and like, what the hell is EBIT? Earning before interest and taxes. Okay, I kind of understand the concept now, right? Like, so I really needed that experience and that time at Pepperdine to really polish me to kind of figure things out. And I just knew I wanted to do something. So then started another company where we're making the little 3D targets back here, designed that thing. Brought in a buddy of mine that I knew from the Israeli Defense Force. Really good dude. He had already kind of had a bit of a foot in the space, especially up in New England. That sucked. We ended up getting pardon my language, ended up getting our throat slit on that one, just bleeding red all over the spreadsheets. Like red's bad in this new job. Red was good before, but yeah. So we did that. Like I've had a lot of failures to kind of get to where I am. So a lot of experiential learning, um, and then really kind of figured out a recipe to kind of beta test ideas and kind of phase them in without like putting everything on the table.
Hey, did you always know you're going to be an entrepreneur? Because I asked that because I see a lot of guys, they leave a group or they leave the army and they're just looking for that sweet GS job. They're just looking to ride out the next however
I
long.
mean,
You've obviously not got that safety
I
net.
think that plays into the whole reason why I joined the military, like you asked earlier. Like, so growing up in southern Indiana, um, this place has got a lot of historical context. Like where I'm from, my hometown, Lewis and Clark actually started their journey here west. Like they met here, you know, there's a lot of commerce. This place used to be a huge, huge backbone for America. A lot of manufacturing came from here. Man, not that long ago, like 10, 15 years ago, like all Colgate toothpaste, the majority of Colgate toothpaste was made here. Pillsbury products were made here. Um, when I was a kid, one of the biggest manufacturers was A.O. Smith, which makes hot water heaters.
Mhm.
They made almost like something ridiculous, like 52% of hot water heaters in America. And then they expanded their factory, and then they started making all the frames for Ford and Chevy and Dodge. And then as I kept coming home while I was in the military, like everything's dying. It's gone. There's nothing. It's empty. You got these beautiful, like historic red brick buildings that are just abandoned, and there's nothing in there. Oh, we're gonna put a tech incubator in here. Well, we're not creating anything in America. And like when I was going into the military, seeing that like it was either I get into manufacturing, like my entire family worked for Ford. We got a job lined up for you. You could be the guy that puts tires on trucks for 20 years. Brr, 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 brr. I'm like, no, like that sounds boring. I watch how like your life is like very regimented. It's the same thing every day, and I just couldn't see myself living in free. Matt, you know me. I'm wound up, and I definitely couldn't live that lifestyle. Like this place is like the Shire. It's very everything's mild. The food, the weather. There's rolling hills with hardwood trees. Everyone's nice to each other. Like I just need to go to Mordor. I need to go on an adventure and kind of feed my soul and see how the rest of the world works. And then coming back here, there's things that I miss that like we've seen in other countries. Like I'm sure there's things you like places you love to visit in Europe that you're like, man, if we just had a shop that was 80% that'd be awesome. Or a restaurant or And so we have unique experiences that we can offer. And I think because of that, like, and we've been tested and proven, and we're a very driven personality. Like, you are an entrepreneur, you know, taking those easy GS jobs and contract jobs. I mean, I think anybody that's listening should just take it to heart that like COVID should have been your wake up call. You should not depend on someone else to feed you. Go feed yourself. Stop putting money in the stock market. Your 10% you put in a 401k because it's a blackjack table, which we'll talk about later. Invest in yourself. Build a small little brand, a small little company, baby step it. I've built my companies out. It always starts with 2,500 bucks. I'm not putting too much out there. 2,500 bucks, and let's see what happens. And then we'll kind of keep playing with it. So, hope
Yeah.
that was like a
I
long way
mean,
around. Sorry.
but it's interesting, right? Because you look at most folks that join the military, especially over the last couple of decades, right? They're either from the Midwest or, big inner cities, right? Uh, and in your story, right, you're kind of looking for adventure, looking for an escape, right? And so you came in military wise, you came in after 9/11,
Nope,
right?
98.
Okay, in 98. So
Soldier medic, yeah.
you stuck through it, right? So that's interesting. I want to hear that perspective, right? So coming in the military, you're looking for an escape, right? Something different. And then as you go through that process, 9/11 happens, what was your motivation after that?
Man, I'll be honest. It's pretty simple. I just wanted to be around the best guys, the guys that worked hard, guys that were intelligent, guys that like, if we're gonna go to war, I want to be around the best dudes, right? I don't want to be around some 54-year-old, you know, E6 that's, been just hanging on, just bumming around. You know what I mean? I want to be around guys that like worked and strived to be better, that pushed you. Like, I love that,
So,
right?
Mikey, real quick, before the war, um, had you put in an assessment packet? Were you trying to get in? So you were a conventional medic, and
Yep.
you were looking at getting into special operations, or
It's a
you had
funny story. Funny story. So, my dad, my dad was in the military. My grandfather, my great grandfather, right, all the way back. So it was going to happen one way or the other. When I was a kid, we lived at Fort Benning for a while. My dad was working over in Sand Hill doing whatever, and I was in the Boy Scouts there. I was probably 12 years old, and at 12 years old, I got to do the Derby Queen, and I was like, this is freaking cool. Not only that, I have an airborne certificate. If you go to my Facebook page, you can see some of my mom posts pictures. I got to go off the airborne towers when I was 12 years old. They got the little chair that they hoist up, and then they kind of act like it's falling. I got to do the swing land trainers at 12. I actually got an airborne certificate when I was 12. The same one you get when you graduate airborne school, not a fake one. Nothing different. And I used to love messing with guys at group. I'd be like, here, and like, damn, Chief, you're old. You look young. But I mean, I grew up around it, and like, man, I'll never forget, like, I got to go to they did a survival thing. You guys ever heard of a thing called Order the Arrow? Like in Cub Scouts to Boy Scouts.
Mhm.
So it's kind of like this rite of passage, and you got to be inducted in it. And so Order the Arrow, they take a bunch of boys. I don't think they could do it anymore. You're sitting by the campfire, like at a Boy Scout camp, and literally Indians, guys dressed like Native Americans, loincloths, full gear. They come across the Chattahoochee River, man, in canoes, and they quietly walk up and grab boys and put them in the canoes in front of their parents. And like the parents obviously signed a waiver, I'm assuming. This, it's the early 90s, who knows? And we get in the canoe with these guys, and you go across, and they make you do work. It's like a baby SEER school kind of thing, looking back, and you're not allowed to talk, and you have an apple and an orange for 2 days, and they show you you have to purify your own water, and then they have like this whole ceremony, and then when you're done, you end up going on this like survival hike with a couple ranger bat guys, and they're taking you out, and like, dude, this guy showed me how to take a turtle and express the oils out of it to make a lantern out of the survival school. Like, and I just thought that was so cool. And then when my dad got out of the military and moved back here, I was like, oh, this is Snoresville, man. Like how, like you guys are playing Little League. I got to go off the jump towers last year and do the Derby Queen. Like, but Special Forces was never really kind of on the horizon for me.
Mm-hmm.
I was working as a medic in Fort Sill, Oklahoma. This is 99, no, 2001, beginning of 2001. Um, Gunshot wounds, there was no tourniquets back then. Gunshot wounds were far and few between, but this guy was cleaning his 308 and shot himself through his leg. Nice through and through the, the femur. And we fought over who was going to get on that ambulance coming out of Fort Sill because bases were open, right? The hospital served the local population there in Lawton, Oklahoma. Man, we grabbed that guy. I got my fist jammed in it, and we're coming in. He's screaming. I don't know. I've never seen a gunshot wound before. Just pictures and fake mannequins. And I'm assuming screaming's part of this. We get in, and there was a doctor that I loved working with. He was very stoic, very quiet, real tall, old, slender guy named Dale Betterton from Dodge City, Kansas. And Dale walks over and he just grabs the guy's face and he slams it down on the gurney and he says, I saw guys in Vietnam with their guts hanging from tree to tree. They didn't fucking scream like this. Knock it off. You're scaring all the patients. So I'm literally just locked onto Dale. I'm like, who is this dude? I thought he was just some dude that was a doctor with his dog traveling around working hospitals. And then so that night when it got slow about 3 a.m., I was like, hey, Dale, can you tell me about this Vietnam thing? And he was like, I was a 91 Bravo Super B. He's like, I did. But it got crazier. So he comes back a little bit later and he goes, you're going to breakfast with me. And I was like, okay. We go to breakfast. It was at Denny's. And of course, like, I'm like a private. So like, what do you get? Like the Grand Slam? Like it's $1.99, but it's a lot of food. And Dale simply orders 2 eggs and an orange and water, no coffee. And he's like, all that stuff's vices. And I'm like, okay, but then all of a sudden, like a bunch of other guys started walking in. Like there was a couple nurses from the hospital, and then the sergeant major from the hospital walks in, and it was their little weekly SFA get together breakfast. And here I am, little like, yeah, I was a corporal at the time because I was the NCO in charge of the ambulance section, little corporal, and they were like talking to me about special forces, sharing stories. The sergeant major goes, "You work for me now." Jeff Miller, he lives in Riverside, California. We still talk. Jeff goes, "You work for me now." Roger that. I just got off shift, and he goes, "Let's go to my office now. You're working now." And I'm like, what am I supposed to, I just got off? I'm like, no, he takes me up to his office. Behind his desk was a picture of him. He was in third group. There's a picture of him doing a jump, a free fall in Africa, and you can see the animals running off in the distance. And I'm like, that's what I want to do. I'm tired of washing a motherfucking ambulance. That's what I want to do. And he was like, hey, you work for me now, so here's what's going to happen. I was an 18 Delta instructor. Here's all the books. This bookshelf, I still have all the books that he gave me. Keep them still to this day. 87, right? Like, but he started prepping me for SFAS. He started having me do all the 18 Delta stuff. Steve DeEllis was there as a PA student, made me shadow him and start learning to write soap notes the right way. And then finally he was like, you're ready. Recruiters weren't coming around to the bases back then. You had to like reach out and then they would come. So then they finally sent a dude out from Carson, and he was like the most disinterested dude to be in Oklahoma. Like the worst TDY ever. Fly into Oklahoma City, drive 2 hours down. I'm sure he was super happy. But yeah, did the PT test, everything went through, and here we are. But that's how it started. But it started with like this brotherhood from the beginning for me.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just, yeah.
Wow. That's awesome.
But you had to name it too.
Yeah.
But like that was kind of like my first touch of like I wanted like this man adventure, this outdoors world. Like it was just
Yeah. It's interesting. Everybody we've interviewed has either talked about mentorship, right? Either they didn't have it and that drove whatever decisions they made, or they had mentors and that's how that they became who they are. Right. And so, I mean, just hearing your story, I mean, there's a lot of mentors that you probably mentioned in that space, but you know, having that specifically drove you in this direction.
Oh,
It's pretty cool.
1,000%. And everything I do today, like I have mentors that from Fortune 25 companies that I've got to meet through shooting and different things. And you know, you're a fool if you don't have a mentor. If you think you know it, like I feel like we wouldn't have evolved from cavemen to where we are if it wasn't like the caveman that's a season ahead of you in life was like, hey dude, so you don't want to touch the fire. It's bad, right? Like you need that guy that's just going to give you like a season ahead of you, right? So I'm sorry. Oh, the Kickstarter? Man, I was sitting in these meetings, these very high functioning meetings with like the board of the Dodgers, like the owners of the Los Angeles Dodgers, the number seven brand in the entire world. And I'm under the table like Googling their acronyms. And like, but and I would have spoke up if I wasn't the only idiot that didn't understand any of these terms, you know? And Investopedia, man, I had it like, it was speed dialed. I was on my phone just, what the hell was that? Writing down the acronyms and like, dude, I had a Rolodex of words I didn't know. And I'm like, I am in over my head. There is no fake it till you make it. It's like, I'm faking it. I got to fix this. Just, I don't want to fail. Because there's a lot of employees underneath me, you know?
Was there something that provoked a shift in your paradigm? So you're sitting there learning all this, and you talked earlier about operations, like you don't really know operations, if you think you do based off the military. What was it in that education part that shifted your paradigm and kind of propelled you into kind of where you are today?
Man, I thought I understood money, and I think we would all, coming from the military, we all get those classes and basic training and every so often on how to manage money. And this is, this is good. This is good debt. This is bad debt. I mean, even there's nothing against Dave Ramsey. If that's where you're at in life, that's your season. But it's not for everybody. And especially if you're going to be an entrepreneur, the Dave Ramsey stuff doesn't work. And I mean, we can get into that madness, but for example, let's talk about interest rates. You guys want to jump into that now? Like,
Yeah, that
and
sounds great. And Patrick's in on that business too.
so and let's be honest. So, Matt, you're getting a house. Let's keep round numbers. So, and luckily I brought my Blues Clues dry erase board for such an emergency. So, all right, how much is your house? Loosely. So just round numbers, 500, 600. All right, that's kind of where everybody in the entire country is. I don't care who you are. All right, so let me try not to write like a serial killer, boys. I know. All right, so we got 500K. What's anybody's got a browser open? Let's just look up and see what prime rates are, because that's probably you're going to get prime +1. So five
and a half.
5.5. All right. So let's keep round numbers again. So APR 5.5, right? 5.5%. All right. So that's what you're shown at the bank, right? And then they give you your monthly payment below, and you're like, I can afford this, yay! But here's what you guys hear, like rich folks, and that book Rich Dad Poor Dad, and different authors talk about like debt is good, debt is good, debt is good. Well, certain debt is good. Fixed interest rates are great, which are SBA loans, small business loans, fixed assets for property, real estate, etc. Even some equipment, like manufacturing equipment, you can get really good fixed rates on. So let's not even worry about this anymore, right? So let's talk about interest rates, because this is what's called the nominal rate, what's shown to you. But what's inflation at today, loosely, round numbers?
9.
Actually, forex will tell you what the exchange, what so let's loose numbers. Let's be fair and say 10%.
Okay.
Okay. I mean, we can get into a whole other theory on that. Is this blinding? Let me do something here. Let me try to fix this. No, I'm not touching the computer. There's a light behind me. See if that makes it a little better to see. Yeah. So,
There you go.
all right. So what we got to do is actually we need to subtract the inflation from the interest rate, and it gives us our real interest rate. So what is our real interest rate? Negative 4.5%. That's your real interest rate this year, compounding. And if it's a 30-year fix and we go year over year, et cetera, eventually you're going to get to a point through inflation where it is free money. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So that's a really awesome thing. And SBA loans right now are like 6.5 because it's prime rate, which is 5.5, right? Like the best rate you can get on the market, 899 credit score, all that jazz. So then you add 1 because the bank needs to make money off lending to you. Because all the bank does is restructure it and sell debt, sell debt, sell debt. That's how the bank makes money, sell debt. So an SBA loan, like you probably end up loosely right now somewhere around a negative 3% interest rate starting year 1, going into year 2, year 3, year 4. Does that make sense? Trying to caveman talk it. So if you go to like a venture capital firm or you go to someone who wants to do equity, what really ends up happening is you end up, it's like having a credit card, like go to Shark Tank, take your business to them and sell them 30% of your company. Well, now everything I own, they get 30% of.
Mm-hmm.
So they need to be bringing at least 3 times that value to me that I'm making off my slice of the pie, or it's not worth it. But what you typically see with VCs are they come in with that initial offer for like that 25, 30%, and they give you just enough tail, a glide path financially to make it to the, a year down the road. And then you're going to need more, and they're going to need more, and you're going to need more. And then they just keep gobbling up that equity until they own you. And then everybody familiar with Kenny Powers? They end up doing, that's what I always called it. Like, this is the old 3 years Kenny Powers. You're fucking out, I'm fucking in play, to be honest. And you're screwed. You're really, really screwed. And the other thing too is guys want to create an item, right? Like I want to make pins, and then I start making pins for other people, right? And the value that you create isn't the pin, right? Because a guy can build a pin plant next door, making similar product, probably even compete with you on price, push you out of business. It's the brand. Everybody's familiar with Expo. You trust them, you love them, you know them, right? And everybody will go get an Expo pin versus, this Moxon tag or whatever. So you want to build your own brand in this process, not just creating a product. Sorry, I know we're kind of segueing into like 3 things we talked about earlier before the show, but
No,
I'll
this
backtrack.
is good. And in the whole idea of afterwards, we aren't thinking about these things. And right now, like I just closed on a house with Patrick, and my interest rate was 5.6. I think it was somewhere around 5.6,
Yeah.
5.7, and we've got pretty good credit scores, my wife and I. So we're looking at that, but ultimately, there's not, even though the housing market is cooling off and everything like that, that house that we bought will probably never, especially in this market in San Antonio, is probably never going to be valued at less than what it is. So that's what we're taking into account. Even though we have a high interest rate, it's monthly that we can afford and everything else. So that 5.6 makes sense to us.
Yeah.
Some people right now are like, oh no, and then they're going to go pay rent on something that a mortgage is still, because they're afraid of that total price tag. And I
Yeah.
guess the paradigm shift for me is when we were looking, I got into real estate 3 years ago. So the paradigm shift for me was when I realized money is never worth more than it is today. Like tomorrow, the dollar is going to be worth less, and the day after that, and the day after that, and the day after that. So buying whatever, even though there's that interest rate, you're still in a better position. And I don't know if that was from listening to Rich Dad, Poor Dad, but in our
You,
initial conversation, and I'm handing it back to you, but in our initial conversation, those are the things that we kind of talked about.
yeah. I mean, it goes back to like Popeye, right? Who was the smartest guy economically on Popeye? Wimby. Give me a cheeseburger today and I'll kindly pay you tomorrow.
Yeah.
Because the dollar's worth less tomorrow. Always take the dollar today. Always do everything you can to take the dollar today. I think, talking to guys that are kind of on the fence or, considering getting out, different things like that, like play with something, make up something, make a widget. Even if you're like building something with your kids in the garage, start a little business and start working on unit economics, the cost of goods, breaking it down piece by piece, how to build margins. And if nothing else, even if it doesn't take off, you're teaching your kids how to run a business. And everybody knows like the whole outliers principle. The sooner you let somebody manipulate something, the better, the more comfortable they're going to be with that opportunity, and to potentially take that path, right? Um, you gotta let kids manipulate this. We over Christmas break, I really love to like make my kids do work, right? Like, oh, you want Christmas money? You may just give me money to go buy presents for everybody. That's cool. Or this is what we're going to do. We're going to create. Oh, sorry, Chelsea brought them for me. So what I did was I had them look online and I said, all right, you guys are going to create something that's not time or resource intensive. I'm going to be an investor. I'm going to give you $30 and you guys are going to create something and you're going to sell it to the grandparents. All right, let's have the grandparents fund this Christmas, right? Because they're a known customer, easy to deal with for them, easy sale. So they went online, picked out a little widget to create, and what we did was we started doing the unit economics. How much does it cost to make one of these? From their time, their resources, equipment, et cetera, et cetera. And then I took them to the store and they bought all the goods, and then they started creating these little things. And then they had to come up with a sales price because I don't want $30 back. How much do I want back? 40. I want $40 back. And then while we were out shopping, there was a little bit of money left over. So they had to feed themselves, right? So that money is rolled in there too. Like they had to budget all their money for lunch and everything for this whole experiment. And so what they ended up creating with these little wooden block, I mean, it's cheesy, but the kids created these little block monsters that like the grandparents thought were fun. And they made money and they learned how to manipulate a little small business on a Saturday and Sunday afternoon. And they had their own little spreadsheet. They didn't realize that I already printed out a little P&L for them, profit and loss statement. We had a unit economic sheet. But getting them to manipulate the business, now they're starting to get a little more comfortable and they understand like when they jump in to help out, where money's going, and what the end result is. So I would tell guys, if you're on the fence and you're getting out, dude, start this with your kids because you're going to learn a lot too.
Mm-hmm.
And I know it sounds super cheesy and lame, but you're going to learn a lot.
Where do you like? So a couple pieces of that, right? So where did they find? Is there a website to go to find cool little widget plans and things like
So
that?
I started,
And then
yeah,
two,
sorry, go ahead.
yeah, and then two. I mean, you're talking about these different spreadsheets. You're speaking terminology that's not
Yeah,
caveman. Where, like, is there a place for cavemen to go figure out how to teach their kids this?
Dave Ramsey has a lot of good resources for folks that are kind of getting into that. There are a lot of like, don't do a business plan, don't get into all that mess because that's super detailed once you've got the process refined. There are, you know what? I'll send you guys some links that you guys can post on this
Okay.
because there's a lot of different resources and they're kind of spread out. There's no unified effort. But how did we get to this monster from me saying you got to make something? I showed them to go to Google and go to trends and go to trending
That's
crafts
awesome.
and they picked a trending craft. like, because that's the world they're growing up in, and they
Yeah.
need to know like how, like what's going on in the world. And then after they looked at that, also showed them to go to Etsy and then go to most popular crafts, and then they filtered that, and then they were able to kind of balance the two, dual source information, nothing different than we haven't done in our past lives, right? They've already kind of had their IPB, which is like your marketing plan. I know who, what, when, where, most likely, most dangerous, courses of action, but you develop that for a customer. We already know
Yeah.
this stuff. It's just kind of shaping it into a business sense. We've
Yeah, so
inherently been
since
doing it for 20
I
years.
moved back to the United States from Germany, we've got this. We're doing this incredibly expensive build out in the country. 4-H, like, hey, I didn't have that growing up as a degenerate in Canada, but we went to the 4-H program here, and they do small business. Like, these young gals were talking to me about like llama poop. I'm like, what? And she's like, yeah, you can actually sell it like right off the ground. Like, people buy it for gardening. And so then when I started like digging into it, um, yeah, that 4-H program is phenomenal for kids. And if anybody has access to it, like, I highly encourage it because we immediately put both our kids into it. My one son wants to be the poultry prince of El Paso County. So I don't know if it'll happen, but just the idea that he wants to just go
Hey,
into business for himself is a win.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, you've got a little
It's
bit
my
of
thing.
experience shoveling poop, so
It's actually not only a living; it's a hobby. It's a life. It's a life. It's a
it's a
lifestyle.
lifestyle.
So
You
that's
really
well,
got to
it's warrant
embrace it.
officer in special forces. You
That, I mean, you're gonna fail, man. If like, I mean,
Yeah.
if you haven't read the book Outliers and you're a soft guy,
Yeah.
you're 20 years behind the power curve. But like, you don't need to hold your kids back. You just
Yes.
need to get them started on something early, right? Like, there would be no Bill Gates or Steve Jobs if their parents didn't have like a unique
Yeah.
access to some of the first computers.
Mhm.
And so getting them in there, getting them comfortable touching some of these things, yeah, they're gonna fail. Don't bet the farm on it, right? But like, give them a little bit of money to play with and start building something. Heck, even if it's you buy them a little tray and some stuff to make bath bombs, and like, how would we package this? What would look good? Getting them manipulating something, building a logo for themselves and a small little website.
Yeah.
You can use Wix and you don't even have to pay for it and build a website and let them practice and play with it.
That's awesome.
A lot of free resources.
Let's
Yeah.
try
Yeah.
and we'll go back and forth after this, and let's try and get some of those websites that you're talking about, whether it's Wix or um, what is you said Google, right? Google.
Yeah,
Hey, what did
Google.
that's
you put
Yeah,
me towards
it's
Canva
new.
for my startup? It's
Yeah,
awesome.
so man, I mean, so for marketing, like, man, like, man, a lot of lessons learned. Like, you kind of want to, like, we're SF guys. We want to utilize our networks, right, and resources. I went to a guy who's kind of like my second cousin, and he does food photography. Man, I got a spice business. Man, can you help me out? I just need to get some good product photos. His quote was ridiculous. It was something like almost 6K to take, 18 to 36 photos. And I was like, my words were definitely not polite. I think it was
I believe it was just go fuck
go
yourself.
fuck yourself. I think that's what I said.
Yeah.
I think that's what it was.
Yeah.
I'm having a hard time remember. And I was like, dude, I was like, you're on crack. I was like, there are tons of resources out there. Like, once again, you overvalue
Yeah.
yourself. There's tons of AI software where you drop a picture in that you took with your phone with a thumbprint smudge, and the cyborgs will just make it all pretty and nice for you. Is it going to be, you know, Fortune 500 worthy? No. Is it
Yeah.
good enough for your little startup? Yeah. And then your website is like sorry, I want to get on this. I want to kind of hit on this as we're talking about all these different things, but your
Always
website's like a
improving.
foxhole, man. Like, you first get there and you just kind of, you get one e-tool scrape, maybe a stick in front of you, right? And then every day that you're kind of there, you're fortifying every moment you get. Um, And you just got to like get your admin time like back in the team room like Mondays or Fridays. Like you got to set aside that
Yeah.
time. That's website time. You got to constantly just do a little love. You don't need to do a complete rebuild, but you're giving a little love every now and again because the algorithms are always changing and they don't tell you. All of a sudden you'll just see traffic is kind of dribbling off and you're like, what am I doing? I'm broken. No, I just got to go give it a little
No, your
love and
recent
mess with it.
videos for Smoked Bros have been phenomenal. Like I'm super impressed because I'm a monkey with 10 thumbs.
Thanks. And I'm just now kind of getting at all that stuff too, finding these different companies that are offering AI where you put in your labels and you put in different things and it will just generate for you. You literally just take 5 pictures around your product and it overlay it to this template, like,
Yeah.
and it's getting cheaper and cheaper, man. Like him quoting me, you know, $5,000-6,000 for some photos. Man, I pay $29.99 a month for this program called
Yeah.
Canva, and it does a pretty decent job. And you build your templates, your colors, your fonts, and you can manipulate stuff. It's like it's like PowerPoint for an 18 Bravo. It really is. Like it's super easy. Like he's not going to be in there messing stuff up. Like it's easy. Hit the enhance button.
Yeah. So
It fixes it.
my
Like
son's been recently into stop motion photography because he builds these like Lego scenes and then he takes a picture and does it. And so actually he was like, hey, I knew I was at a weird point in my life when my 12-year-old son was like, hey, can we do this with your bags? I was like, yes, actually, that's a great idea, and I really need that for my website because just to show it, right? Like, so thank you, 12-year-old, for making me feel like an idiot, but it's perfect, and we've been doing it over the last week. It's awesome.
I mean, think about it.
Yeah,
Like he's learning photography. He's doing stop motion. He's doing marketing. I mean, dude,
yeah,
they're growing up in a different world to where, I mean, we grew up, we had pool knob turned TVs, right? And like
Mhm.
commercials were everything. Now it's show me
yeah,
what your small business does in 7 seconds. Da, 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 da. Wow, that's such a
yeah.
succinct narrative. You know what I mean? Compared to Kung Fu grip, backyard, water features, blah, blah,
Yeah. Plus, I
like
was
all
too
the
busy
old
throwing
commercials when
lawn
we were
darts in the
kids.
air,
Like,
trying to hit my brother. So it's awesome watching this. Like they're phenomenal. They're way ahead of where we were.
yeah,
Yeah, no, definitely. And
but
the
For sure.
I
and
when everything was moving from Photoshop, like I think it took a long time for a lot of us who saw Photoshop as a thing to say, yeah, we can get a service like Canva, and it's for the type of use we have, since that's not our graphic design's not our thing. Just looking at those, we aren't experts, but the resources are out there, and I think just talking to other professionals in that space, they'll guide you to these different things, like what you're talking about.
absolutely. Like, I think that was one of my biggest heartaches getting out, right? Like, and it still is to this day. Like, my wife and I were just talking about it before we hopped on here. Like, man, it
Yeah.
is hard to know who to
Mhm.
trust, right? It's hard to know because she was like, "Hey, I want to do this Chamber of Commerce thing." I'm like, "I don't want to go hear these dudes." Because they're augured in, right? Like they've got their corner painted out, like they're the G chief of the area, and I'm the shadow government. I'm still setting up my stuff, and I'm gonna come in, and you're not gonna know it, and bam, like that's kind of how in my mind I'm still processing things, and I'm like, well, why wouldn't I go talk to this guy? He's not gonna take, he's not in the
Yeah.
spice game. He's not in my, you know what I mean? I got to kind of tamp it back a little bit that like they're competition, but they're not the enemy, you know? And there's a lot of synergies and collaboration you can have with guys that are, half a step or even a step left or right of your lane that could
Hey,
really help
Mikey,
you out
something I've been
when you get
struggling with,
resources.
and I want to hear your thoughts on it. So, I grew up in special forces, right? Like, I know how to prioritize, my 15-meter range
Mm.
to my 300-meter range, right? Like, yeah, I know what's most dangerous and how to get past it. That being said, I don't necessarily understand time management because I've been in the Army for the last 20 years. And from a business perspective, how do I how do you partition your time to be as productive as you can?
man, it can always be better, right? Because like that's part of the other saying, right? It's better to have a dollar today than a dollar tomorrow. To tag into that, and then like my next saying that I always tell myself is, I can
Keep
always get more money, I can't get more time. So prioritizing my time, where am I going to get the best bang for my money, right? Like what's hurting me now? Like through my website, I have like a radar chart that shows me kind of how to keep the balance of the wheel, right? Like finances, traffic, this, that, like what kind of gives me a little bit of a snapshot, but you got to interpret that data personally. But like, man, time management, it's tough because especially if you were an 18 Delta, you want to treat your business like it's a baby in the NICU and you want to be on top of it nonstop, right? You're sitting there by the monitors and like, I
yeah.
gotta stay on top of this. But I think honestly, like I really don't have like a dry erase board like we had in the team room, like this, and this. Um, I literally wake up Monday morning and I go, what do I need to improve? What's hurting us? What needs to get better, right? I sat down Monday morning on the toilet, no joke, and I kind of look at that radar chart and I go, well, because I look at week over week, right? Performance and like what needs my love now, right? And then I do, I think as soft guys, the best thing we do is relationship management. I do typically take, if you look at like when most people are active on social media, that means they're screwing off. Thursdays are that day. Right now, it used to be Wednesdays. Thursdays is that day. I usually take half of Thursday, either morning or afternoon, and I do relationship management. Shoot a text out to people I haven't talked to in a while, like, "Hey, what's up, man? How you doing? How can we help each other?" Because hearing other people, just chit-chatting with your friends or people in your network, you're gonna see things that they're struggling with that you may not be paying attention to as well. So having these small little chit chats and conversations like, "Hey Matt, what's going on? Man, I'm down here. I'm down in Arizona talking to these Air Force dudes trying to sell some bags." But how's that move your needle? How
Yeah.
far is it going to move your needle? Do you see what like us? And it's not really calling BS. It's you 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 already think you have the answer and you see the end, but somebody asking a few pointed questions really gives you
Yeah, I
that
agree.
step back to look at stuff. So having a business person that's a season ahead of you for that admin time, somebody that's already done it, right? And then you have your little peer group, your little chamber of commerce that you know, love, and trust, and you value their opinions, and just running stuff by them.
It's awesome.
You know, I think from
Yeah.
a time management piece, don't get sucked in, and always ask yourself, how far is this going to move the needle? How far is it going to move the needle? Is it worth me missing baseball practice? Because we already did that for long enough. Or can I just go into work an hour earlier while they're at school? Or you know what I mean? While they're already
Hey,
occupied, their
so
family's
all
already
right.
doing
Hey,
something.
how's Smoked Bros going? This is what everyone's gonna dial in for is, hey, you've got like this phenomenal line, this smoke, pun intended, this smoking marketing platform, dude. I crush Point Man. Like as you can see, this is almost exclusively been used on like meat, and then as odd as this sounds, eggs. Like my kids can't do scrambled eggs without Point Man. Um, you're just like you're firing on all cylinders, and the Lambdons love your product, and we just talked about it last night because my son is this little culinary wannabe genius. Um, Getting your subscription.
Trailer house. Yeah,
What's that?
in the trailer house.
It's a 40-foot trailer. But
Sorry.
oh, I hate my life. However,
But
man, it's funny how on a little tiny burner, it's like I'm in like base or like I'm in the Q car skin or whatever. Yeah, I've got this like
you're in the
hot
barracks.
single burner. However, man, you whip up like throw this on some eggs, dude. It's awesome. So, hey, can you talk to me a little bit about like, hey, Smoke Bros, where you are, where you're going?
So Smoke Bros, man, again, kind of taking those experiences we had, right? Like got to be all over the world and have like amazing food and then coming back and things are bland and we've got different medical conditions. So Smoke Bros is a premium craft spice company. We started out really focusing on kind of the barbecue space, working with competition barbecue teams. Um, and we just started creating different craft blends, man. Stuff that's unique, like flavors that we've had, and like shellback, which is probably the best one to talk about. So let me grab it here. So shellback is our version of a seafood seasoning, and obviously it's got a military term. You know what a shellback is, right? So, but you can see how red this guy is. If you put this guy, you did the Pepsi challenge between this and like Old Bay seasoning, like where we source the spices, we use large grain. Like if you tasted this and then tasted Old Bay, you would go, it's like drinking a flat Coke because it's all about the sourcing and the grain size. Um, and not just that, like all of us have head injuries. I don't care who you are. If you're a soft guy, you were in did any airborne ops or roping, you've got some spots on your bean. And heavy metals are known to cause Alzheimer's. And all those anti-caking chemicals that are in all the stuff at the store, that's what's going to cause you to have early onset Alzheimer's. It's zinc, it's like chromium, like it's all heavy metals. And so it's terrible for you. So we wanted to take flavors from around the world, right? And take out the stuff that's going to hurt us and to create value for our friends, create jobs for our friends. And it's been a lot of fun. Um, Matt's smart enough to figure it out. Like that's part of our messaging piece that we struggle with. Um, they're spice blends, but yeah, it's a seafood seasoning. You can use it on anything because it's just a spice blend. You can make Bloody Marys with it. We got a Bloody Mary recipe we need to drop. And and so yeah, they're just spice blends and having a lot of fun with it. We're actually looking at doubling our plant capacity. We just started ordering more machines. Some of them started coming in, and man, like it's just been a lot of fun, and we get a lot of little cool ideas from meeting folks. And I don't know, man, it's kind of hard to talk about it because it's just we got 18 different blends. Like we got a bulgogi seasoning. Obviously, being a first group guy, I've leaned in very heavily on, Asia. But now we're going to start doing some Middle East, Mediterranean blends, and then we'll get into Europe. But we want to definitely like start building these. Well, this winter we're going to start building out packs that are like group specific, right? Here's kind of the third group bundle. Here's the, first group bundle. Here's here.
So so you
Like,
so you're
yeah,
you're
go ahead. Sorry.
you're pulling from your experience in SOF and saying, hey, there's something that we can share with everybody. So everybody's going to get something out of your specific experience. And you've been able to Smoke Bros sponsored what was the event there in Louisville,
Oh, we did the Coast Harris
which
Children's
is
Hospital
huge
barbecue
there in
competition.
in Louisville. So you've been
Yeah,
able to go from, and how old is your company? Three? Is it 3 years?
we're getting
So you,
close. December
in
will be
less than
3.
3 years, you're able to sponsor COSAR Children's Hospital in in their fundraiser. Like that, that's pretty phenomenal.
Yeah, we do a lot of sponsorship. So first off, I haven't paid myself out of this company yet to date. I haven't. I want the company to be out living its values, participating in veterans opportunities. Um, you know, I think we got a phone call with Operation Enduring Warrior coming up. OEW guys want to talk about maybe us kind of working together on some things. Um, Roman's Warrior Foundation in Bloomington, Indiana. Our entire salt line. If so, any of our spices that have the tiger stripe label on them, 100% of profits go to, once cost of goods are covered, 100% of profits go to the Joey Proctor Silver Star Scholarship here in Indiana, which pays for scholarships for kids that are going to go into service, first responder, LEO, or military. Because we all know when you go into those service jobs, you get paid a whole lot your first few years. So instead of giving kids that are going to college, this charity here in Indiana um, goes to sponsor kids that are going to come back and do service to kind of encourage kids. And man, I think last year we through the salt blends we raised something like I think 2,600 for them, and that was in like 2 months. And so this year we'll reconcile in December and just cut them big Happy Gilmore check and hand it to them.
So we covered through our conversation. We've covered kind of
Yeah.
your journey through soft and your introduction into um, this kind of brotherhood, and then where you've gone. You've had a paradigm shift. You've gotten into business. Through all of that and where you're at right now, we see potential for a lot more growth and a lot more encouragement of growth in others. What is the primary takeaway where you're sitting today? What's the primary takeaway that we can leave for people that are listening in anticipation of what they're going to do after SOF?
Man, this is super near and dear to my heart. So most people, if you get out of the military and you go get a 9 to 5 or a contracting gig, you're probably going to get some sort of 401k, or you're even going to give up a piece of your retirement, right? If you get a federal job, which I think is pretty silly. Um, Most people on average, I looked it up, I think most people on average save or invest 10 to 15% paycheck per paycheck, right, into the stock market. The stock market is, I don't care, you can get mad at me, I'll give you my email. It's nothing more than a blackjack table, right? You have no influence, because there's no such thing as control. You have no influence on how it does. And you're just putting your money there hoping that it makes money. If you look historically, like all these numbers are out there, they've had AI do the study for the last 10 years. If you put money on the stock market, it's only going to get on average 7% growth year over year. And what did I say inflation was at? 10%. So subtract those. Remember how we talked about percentages? So subtract inflation from that. So it's -3. And we haven't even talked about stockbrokers' fees or any of that. So you're losing money by parking in the stock market, unless you just happen to hit the big one, right? You're better to go play Monopoly Millionaire scratch offs, right? Like seriously. Um, Invest in yourself, man. Start out small, build something, build a brand. Like there's only one way, and you can look back after World War II when venture capital and everything really kind of took off. Main Street is over 97% of the economy. Wall Street is nothing more than a thermostat for what's happening on Main Street. Invest in yourself, build familial and generational wealth, build a brand, build something that you can pass along, right? Um, yeah, you really got to invest in yourself, phase into it, and you'll learn a lot along the way. Just slowly start putting something in there. There's nothing better than working for yourself. And the next thing too is those guys that were in the team room that are like the negative assholes. Everybody knows those guys, the grumpy curmudgeon dudes. You're still probably buddies with a few of them. Don't ever talk to them about your business unless they've run a business. Like those guys are the guys that are like, they're not going to be helpful. Snakes eat other snakes, right? That's what we always say. And like you're gonna get dudes that see you start to be successful and then try to parrot you. Just keep being you, man. You're gonna get guys that try to mirror and parrot you once you start finding some success. Um, get that mentor that's a season ahead and build your own little brotherhood of like-minded people that you can once a week, once every couple of weeks bounce ideas off of. But invest in yourself. Stop investing in some company that you can't touch. It gives your family a chance to manipulate something. And dude, even if you start a little bakery, or I got a buddy that I went to Pepperdine with. He lives on Pebble Beach where the poor people live, like the really, really poor people. And you know what he owns? 7 laundromats, car washes. And like at the end of the day, like just find a niche in your community, something that you saw while you're overseas that you feel comfortable manipulating. And if you don't, get a mentor, somebody who's done it before to help you out and just start building, man. Build your own stuff. We're all stronger. We're smarter than everybody else. I'm serious. We were asked to do more at a higher pace and a higher tempo than everybody else. Why are you going to go work for some guy who's been set in a cubicle, looks like Dilbert mouth breathing? Do for you and your family. Build familial and generational wealth. And if you fail, learn lessons, do it again, start over. I mean, that's who we are.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
at www.smokedbros.com.
Oh, you're on a subscription.
So we've got three different subscription situations. So we have a spice of the month, right? And so we have different blends and unique blends. And next year that's going to change. It's going to be an annual subscription. And then we're going to we'll forecast kind of what those are. So if you want to buy them as a gift for people for Christmas. Um, and then you can actually just order monthly, like how many bottles you want a month. Because like I know Matt's addiction. Most people, I would say Honey Badger is our most epic seller. Like this guy is crack on crack. Um, we have guys that do 2 or 3 bottles of it. Um, you know, yeah, just go under the product and they're right there. You can buy one time, just kind of like Amazon, right? One time. You could do a monthly
Okay.
subscription, or you could do the Spice of the Month Club, and you save a considerable amount because we're able to forecast. It helps us out. We pass the savings on to you. Um, I do want to piggyback one thing. Um, I didn't know shit about shit when it comes to regulations and this. I mean, if you really think about it, this is a very complex situation. There are people out there willing to help you, man, right? Chile went and found a guy through the SFA down in Texas, and a guy who was like 22-time Texas Chili champ. His brother was an old Mac V guy that a dude knew and got me in contact with them, and here we are. You know what I mean? And we have chili packets, and he helped me with the recipe, and all he wanted was just hang out, drink some beer, and
I
kind of
think that was
support his business as well. So
no. I was just going to say this to Matt. I think I just heard a plug for the SFA. Ah,
dude, thanks, man. That recipe, the whole concept behind it was I had to be able to, it couldn't be spicy, right? Everybody, you can add your own heat to it. Nothing we have is super spicy, low sodium. So you can add your own salt and your own heat to it. But I needed it to be rich enough to where we could do venison and hide it, right? I wanted to do wild game in it. And so the litmus test was black bear. And I don't know if you've ever eaten black bear, but it is like take half a tub of Crisco, dump it in your chili pot, and and then take like the most gamiest meat you've ever had and chuck it in there with it, right? And if it could make black bear taste good, man, we could sell the crap out of it.
That's all.
Oh, I'm gonna
Yeah.
cry.
career guys, right?
He froze at the
All right.
perfect time.
Yeah. No, this has been great. Yeah. We're going to close this down a little bit. Daniel's going to ask a couple questions as our part of our hot seat program, and I've got a ton more questions I'm going to ask you offline after via email or
Yeah,
something.
man.
But appreciate you having you on,
Dude,
man.
thanks for having me. This is awesome. I love talking to the guys. Um, Typically do a podcast every month at a minimum, and most guys want to
Yeah.
talk about the war. Tell me a war story. And then my
Next
response
time
is
we have
every
you
asshole
on,
has a war
well, it'll
story.
be politics next time we'll talk to you about.
Oh yes, I love. How do you feel about Kyle Rittenhouse? Like, oh my gosh. I feel like you got to be the G chief in those conversations. Like, everybody was stupid for being there because that's situational awareness. Like,
Okay.
come
Right.
on, man.
Yeah. But everybody's looking for a one-liner,
Yeah,
right? Everybody's looking for that
that soundbite.
So
viral
Matt
situation.
just
Yeah.
texted me. He got booted. So we have this quick. We're refining it. I'm going to ask you the same questions I asked Dardia, and it was really good. We're trying to refine it down into something a little bit better that we're just going to, when we go to different events, ultimately that's all we want to do is get that bunch of wisdom. So you can answer it as fast as possible. You don't have to sit there and think and contemplate. We aren't looking for for depth, we're going to use this for shorts and to promote
Yeah.
you and your brand too. So the first question is, what was a positive experience you had in combat?
I think the positive experience from combat is the fact that knowing that we have a level of resiliency and camaraderie that makes us and the most formidable force there is on the planet, right? Knowing that as a collective ODA, there is nothing you cannot accomplish, like literally, and knowing that with the right preparation and the right build up towards something, you're able to accomplish something that's so complex and so dangerous, but yet have amazing outcomes. I think that's like overarching, that's the
Yeah.
biggest thing for me.
One thing you would have done differently in your career. So we talked about all this. You had some pretty good mentorship that got you into special forces, but what's the one thing looking back that you would say, hey, if I could do it over again, I would change the way I did that?
I think looking back on a lot of different things, I don't think I think I would have definitely taken more advantage of dwell time instead of hiding it, right? And kind of, I think I definitely would have when I
Yeah.
would have taken better care of myself, like physically, like, you know, I would have definitely done a better job of taking care of myself. I would have definitely invested a little bit more into my kids, especially. I would have, you know, instead of always kind of being in that Goodfellas mafia mindset where we're into the team and everything's a team and it becomes this very, I mean, it's a great place, but there is this kind of narcissistic, selfish bubble around the team, right? And I wish I would have been a little forward thinking and invested more in my own physical health and not hide injuries and my kids.
What is your most important daily ritual or habit that you've developed either while you were in the military or since you've graduated from Pepperdine?
Daily ritual, um, it's like IPB, right? If you're not doing any type of intelligence work, you're going in uncalculated, unforecasted. And every morning, man, it's a religion. I sit, everybody thinks I'm just sitting there. I got the news going and kind of hearing current events and what's happening economically, right? And then at the same time, I'm looking what's happening in my industry, my sector, and then how my customers or the brand is engaging out in the world, right? And how can I nest these three things that are extremely important? They really are. Like there is no separation. Like it's all consumer sentiment I'm hearing about on the news is impacting me, and how's the brand leveraging this to create value for this entire bubble. So doing that homework every morning, a good 45, 50 minutes,
Yeah,
is
definitely.
super critical.
An important lesson learned that you want others to know.
You're going to fail more in business than you've ever failed in your life. You're going to fail more because there are things that forces at work that you don't even know
Mm-hmm.
exist yet. You know what I mean? You don't have a full visual array of the battlefield, and there's so much stuff that's changing that you have no control over, and it changes like that. SEO for a website. Google changes that algorithm tonight at midnight, and you're like, why have I just lost $1,000 today? And it gets a little scary. And then it kind of goes back to the point I just made as well, nesting all that together.
And what's one truth that helps you better help others?
Humans are more important than hardware. Doesn't matter what the product is. Like, Smoke Bros was doing well before I met Matt. You know, we kind of got together. We were doing okay. But now it's doing a little bit better because I got Matt, right? That those relationships, man, these intangibles that we have with each other, we need to stop eating each other because none of us are winning out here. It's us versus them, and I think we have a tighter, more tested, vetted community, and we need to support each other and stop trying to eat each other like we used to in the team
Yeah.
room. None of us are winning.